I think it's okay to take risks because even if they do backfire, in a couple of years, none of it will be a big deal. So I think I should remind myself to take risks.
I'm Robin Johnson. This is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Robbie Kelly from Basil's Fungi Farm.
As one of the goals this year actually is to try and put more effort into individual varieties and learn how they like to be treated and do a better job of growing them.
And I think a lot of that is down to the quality of the mushrooms, and you've got good branding, you've got a good presence online, and the market that you're appealing to, you can relate to because you were a chef. So, you can approach chefs confidently and say, look, here's a product. I used to be a chef. Here's a product that I make that I can guarantee that you can cook with. This show tells the story of the makers, the people that create things, whether it's in wood or metal, whether they're artists or musicians or chefs. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell their story.
You have to be fairly particular, but there is some room for error. With most mushrooms, there's some room for error with your fruiting room conditions. So we don't have a perfect setup by any means. It's all been done for cheap and quickly and out of salvage materials and things. So it's definitely not perfect, but it's good enough that we can grow 80% of what we want to grow.
I'm Robin Johnson. This is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Robbie Kelly from Basil's Fungi Farm. So Robbie, tell me, what do you do at Basil's Fungi Farm?
Well, we grow a range of gourmet mushrooms from scratch, all for chefs and greengrocers.
When you say gourmet mushrooms, what's the difference between a normal mushroom and a gourmet mushroom?
Well, when I tell people I grow mushrooms, a lot of them assume that I'm doing things for medicinal tinctures like reishi and cordyceps and whatnot, which we experiment with from time to time, but more for fun. The business is producing food for chefs and the general public.
And what sort of mushrooms are they?
There's a whole load that we do, but the common denominator is that they're saprophytic mushrooms. So they're mushrooms that eat dead plants. So oyster mushrooms, lion's mane, velvet shank, which are like an enoki mushroom, coral tooth, piopinos. These are all mushrooms that are primary decomposers. So they eat sawdust or straw. So
interesting. And they're really beautiful as well. When you watch them grow, they're quite incredible things, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's one of the main focuses for me is picking things that are pretty. I don't know why, but that's something that's drawn me in.
How did you get started?
I got started when I was about 16 and I was in college doing a biology course. And I started reading some really interesting books by Paul Stamets, and one by George Monbiot called Feral about ecology, and one by Merlin Sheldrake called Entangled Life. So I was reading books about ecology and some that were more specifically about mushrooms and how they interact with ecosystems and how they can be used as almost industrial tools to execute chemical reactions. And, they're little powerhouses. They do all sorts of interesting things. So I read those books, really, really developed a passion for it, and then started experimenting with growing them at home in my bedroom. So small batches.
And just spiraled from there?
Well, not really. I mean, I've always been quite curious. I've always had all sorts of hobbies and, really varied, bizarre hobbies. So I kind of put that on the shelf for a while. I grew a few mushrooms. I put it on the shelf for a while and then ended up working all the time as a chef for a few years and really got stuck in with that. And then decided that I didn't really want to be working as a chef and that I would like to start a business. And it occurred to me that no one nearby was doing gourmet mushrooms. So I kind of put the two and two together. I put in my passion for mushrooms and my experience in the food industry and started growing mushrooms commercially. So I did it out of my spare bedroom at first, or the family home. And really quickly scaled it from there
to where you are now.
To where I am now.
And so you're in Hastings. You're down in the yard.
Yeah.
Which is it's quite a cool space, isn't it? It's I think was it the old gasworks yard, wasn't it? And I think there was a load of little workshops because the supermarket opposite used to be the old gasworks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, back in the day. And I think the yard might be the workshop yard for it. It's a load of small buildings in a kind of triangle, isn't it?
Old buildings, yeah, in a triangle.
And there's loads of little businesses down there.
Yeah, I think there's 55 tenants.
Really?
You wouldn't think it.
You definitely wouldn't think it.
Yeah.
It's pretty small for
Yeah.
55 people.
Yeah.
But it's a great little thriving community.
It is. Yeah, there's so many amazing, fascinating people that pop up. So much to learn from all the people.
That's a good spot. And for you, your process of growing mushrooms it's when I've been to visit you, you grow your mushrooms in the pellets that we produce here in sawdust sometimes.
Yeah.
And when I've been down there to see it, it's fascinating. It really is quite a process to go from, a bit of sawdust to a finished mushroom. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so accustomed to it now that it seems obvious and boring. And people come in and they're so amazed by it all. And for me, it kind of, I've lost that. But when I think about it, it is amazing. But the process really is relatively simple. It's we have to be strict with how we perform the process, but it's a relatively simple process. We use sterile technique, so we take organic materials, so sawdust, straw, bean husks, grain. We sterilize it all, so we've got a few different ways of doing that. We've got pressure cookers, we've got a big atmospheric steam sterilizer that we've built. So we kill off all competing organisms. There's no bacteria, mold, yeast present in that substrate. Once it's sterile and it's properly hydrated, we take it to our little clean room or lab space where we inoculate it with mycelium that we've grown. All of that sounds kind of simple, but then it gets a lot more complicated when you look at it more closely. Producing the mycelium is a mission.
How do you do that?
So we start from Petri dish normally. So we'll either be purchasing cultures from culture banks, or we'll be trading with other mushroom farms, or we'll be going into the wild and finding mushrooms growing and taking tissue samples and cloning them. We've got quite a few of those now. So we start with little Petri dishes of mycelium, which all have to be completely sterile. You have to be very careful when you work with them not to contaminate them. And then we expand that mycelium across sterile substrates. So we'll normally go onto grain, and then that grain will go into more grain, and then that grain will go into our bulk substrate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A little bit like the starter for sourdough.
It's a bit like that, yeah. Or even like taking cuttings from a plant. Yeah, it's like propagating. You're propagating. You're not going back to seed. You're not breeding the mycelium. You're just taking cuttings and letting that expand.
So are you still using mycelium that, obviously it's been through different mediums, but you're still using the original mycelium for some of your mushrooms?
Yeah, so we've got like mother cultures that where we're really cautious to keep the generations as young as possible, if that makes sense. So we'll maybe grow out a Petri dish a few generations, and then we'll go back to that original Petri dish every time.
How do you keep that in that Petri dish? Will it just be there forever?
So there's multiple different ways of doing this, and it gets really technical and people disagree on how you should do it. But we use culture slants, which are like test tubes, which are sterile. They've been properly sterilized with gamma radiation, I think.
How do you do that?
Well, we purchase them.
Gamma radiation?
Yeah, I don't have a gun, but I buy them in. So we essentially have these little test tubes with a nutrient jelly that we make up and pour. And we can grow mycelium across that nutrient jelly and then keep it in cold storage for a couple of years at a time. And then even those, every couple of years, we'll have to grow them out, check they're still healthy, and then put them back into a new culture slant.
Wow.
So it takes a bit of management.
Mycelium is quite a fascinating thing. I was introduced to the idea of mycelium a few years ago when I did a garden, a lot of furniture garden for Chelsea Flower Show for a garden designer, Joe Perkins, and the whole theme of the garden was the mycelium and how it interacts with the trees and the plants around it and stuff. And mycelium is the communication transport network between plants often, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so many fascinating things that mycelium can do. I forget half of it because there's too much to remember, but as I said, those books that I read by Merlin Sheldrake and Paul Stamets, they'll teach you more than you could possibly imagine. But yeah, mycelium does all sorts of things with sort of trading nutrients between healthy and young plants, and they kind of give that extra leg up to the younger plants by not necessarily stealing from the stronger plants, but trading. They will actually swap nutrients with the plants, and they have exchange rates where this plant will get a better price than that plant because it's got more of a certain material.
Really?
Yeah, it's bizarre. And then there's things. There's examples of plants sending like signals of distress through the mycelium, which then transports that to other plants. And if one plant's attacked by aphids, it can tell all the other nearby plants through the mycelium.
I've read that is it The Secret Life of Trees? I think I read about that.
Oh yeah.
That's a really good book as well.
Yeah, I've not read that one yet. I think I bought it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You'd love it. It talks a lot about the mycelium, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's really interesting to think about this tiny organism. I mean, when you look at it, they're on a petri dish. It's tiny,
It's
isn't
microscopic. Yeah.
But it's making such a huge impact into the entire world.
Yeah. Yeah. Tremendous.
And I think in that book I read about a mycelium that had a radius of 5 miles.
I think there's one even larger than that. I think the largest organism on Earth is a mycelium colony culture.
Bigger than 5 miles.
I think it's in acres.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't remember how big.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Talk me through the process. So you've got your mycelium that you propagated on grain or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then what's next?
Well, by the time we're at grain, we're already halfway through the process. So initially we're with the culture slant, and then we're going to a Petri dish, and then often from a Petri dish we'll go to a liquid culture, which is like a really dilute, not even a syrup, but a sugary solution, maybe 2% sugar. So it's just slightly sweet, and in that solution we can grow a lot of mycelium really quickly, and then we can use that to inoculate bags of grain. You can maybe get 20 or even 50 bags of grain out of that one jar of liquid culture. And then each one of those bags of grain can be used to further inoculate another 10 to 20 bags of grain. So it's amazing. You can go from a Petri dish to literally tons of sawdust within a matter of months.
Really?
Yeah, because it grows so quickly, and if you're constantly splitting it off, it's exponential how quickly you can grow it.
And then when you split it off from the last bit of grain and put that bit of grain into the sawdust, how long does it take from putting it into the sterilised sawdust to having a mushroom that you can eat?
Yeah, it's partly dependent on the culture, on the species. It's partly dependent on the environment, like the temperature and what's in the substrate. But normally we expect it to be fully colonized by mycelium within a week to 2 weeks.
Really?
Some cultures are a bit longer. And then at that point it goes into our grow room, and in the grow room it's typically another 2 to 4 weeks.
So 6 weeks from putting it in the bag to having the, would you call it the fruit when it's...
Yeah, I would call it the fruit. Yeah.
And what conditions does it need to be in? Does it need to be in a very specific kind of environment?
Yes, I think it's not... You have to be fairly particular, but there is some room for error. With most mushrooms, there's some room for error with your fruiting room conditions. So we don't have a perfect setup by any means. It's all been done for cheap and quickly and out of salvage materials and things. So it's definitely not perfect, but it's good enough that we can grow 80% of what we want to grow. Then there's a few things that require a bit more particular conditions, and it takes a bit more care to grow them. And we're kind of gradually trying to become proficient at growing those as well and create better systems for it all. But generally speaking, they like to have a humid environment with fresh air, and the temperature likes to be around 15 to 18 degrees. But it's more detailed than that. It's not that simple. Because even the humidity needs to be swinging. You can't have just a steady humidity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you need the process of water condensating and then evaporating to encourage the mushrooms to start growing.
Like day and night.
Yeah, you need the wicking of the moisture for it to trigger growth.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And the more that you have been growing mushrooms, the longer that you've been growing mushrooms and the more that you do it, is there still things that you're learning and you're kind of optimizing and tweaking?
Absolutely, yeah. I know nowhere near enough about growing mushrooms. I think the sad thing is it becomes a thing of business. You become more bogged down in the actual running of a business rather than the growing of the mushrooms. But I'm definitely constantly learning, but I have a lot more I need to learn.
And talking of running the business, how have you found it going from having a full-time job as a chef to then starting and running your own business at the same time as trying to grow it, trying to learn everything you can about the mushrooms? How have you found it?
Incredibly difficult, really fun and fulfilling. And I'm constantly learning all sorts of things and going on random adventures to pick up, materials that we need and equipment. I have a lot of fun with it, and I wouldn't change it, but it's incredibly difficult and stressful.
What have been the hardest challenges?
Self-organization, knowing what's the right thing to do with my time, knowing if I'm, am I spending my time properly? Should I be focused more on this and this, or, making difficult decisions in terms of, how should we be doing things? Am I doing the right things? Am I approaching the right people? Am I, there's the thing with business is it's so broad. There's so many different things you have to think about. It just becomes overwhelming at times. So,
when you just want to be growing mushrooms, but you've got to be paying the bills at the same time.
Sure. Miraculously, we've made it almost 2 years now. So
that's really good.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is down to the quality of the mushrooms, and you've got good branding, you've got a good presence online, and the market that you're appealing to, you can relate to because you were a chef. So you can approach chefs confidently and say, look, here's a product. I used to be a chef.
Yeah.
Here's a product that I make that I can guarantee that you can cook with.
I think it makes a big difference. Yeah. Being able to level with them.
And the majority of your sales are to business, essentially.
Yeah.
You're selling to chefs in
probably 90%.
Really?
Yeah.
And in the whole local area.
Yeah, we're starting to branch out and go a bit further afield. So we're working with a wholesaler in Brighton, who takes that even further than Brighton. Some of it goes up to London, and then we're starting to pick up customers that are, an hour's drive away rather than 10 minutes drive.
But you're still doing deliveries yourself?
Yeah. Unless we're working with a wholesaler. A lot of it goes to wholesalers now, probably 40% of it goes to wholesalers, and they obviously then do the delivering direct to the restaurants, which is a lifesaver. But all of the delivery driving that we have to do as a business is done by me, which is a bit of a pain. But
because you've got to wear every single hat, you're doing you're doing the accountancy, you're doing the delivery driving, you're growing the mushrooms, you're propagating it all, you're sterilising everything.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll be a point where you could happily take on a full-time employee and train them up?
Well, I would absolutely love to. It's very difficult because money is tight. I'm really lucky to have a couple of guys who've offered to volunteer with me a day a week. So I do have some help there with the actual manual labour, the production. That's a lifesaver. But they've got their own commitments. They're not always around. It's not a full-time thing by any means. I'd love to have someone there all the time who I can bounce ideas off of and work with me and help me get things done. But we're just at that really tricky point right now where we're so close to being able to scale it to that point, but the amount of work that it's taking to scale to that point is almost prohibitive, if that makes sense. We're probably near being able to take on staff, but it feels impossible to get to that point from where we are now.
Yeah, I remember that feeling. And then I remember the first, second, third members of staff and thinking, oh my goodness, can I afford to take these people on? I'm going to have to pay them before I pay myself. By the time you get to the fourth and the fifth, you think, oh, I can actually, it kind of frees up, because when you get a few people in, you have a basic management structure. And you can allocate and delegate to a load of staff.
Yeah.
And that allows you to do what you need to do, which is probably getting new work in, building the client relationships, all of that sort of stuff, developing the new mushrooms or
systems, and thinking about how we should do things.
And that's key, really. But you almost need to get those staff to get to that point. But it's like a chicken and egg thing.
It is.
Do you take the stuff on and then try and bankroll it until you're big enough to afford them? But by taking those stuff on, you can produce a lot more. Or do you try and produce more and burn yourself out until the point where you can employ someone and then take them on?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. We'll work it out. I have faith that we'll work it out. We're very close, but
Well, you've done fantastic to get from where you started to where you are now within the space of 2 years. It's been really impressive to watch, and it's great coming down to the yard to see you grow in space. It's quite a fantastic, quite a fan. I mean, it's a little bit dingy and damp, but it's really cool when you go in and there's steams blowing away. It's very atmospheric when steams blowing around, and there's amazing lion's mane and pink oysters growing here, there, and everywhere. I mean, they're really impressive things.
It is impressive.
Yeah, you've done a really good job down there.
Thank you. That's very kind.
What's your plan for the future?
That's a big question.
It is, but I'll make it easier. In the next couple of years, where do you see the fungi farm growing? Do you think you're going to expand? Have you got any aims and objectives? Do you want to be selling to a wider audience, direct to public, or?
I think that's a good question. We're going to keep scaling it, but not indefinitely. I don't want it to get to the point where it just feels like a factory and it's kind of inhuman and soulless. I quite like the idea of having it being at a scale where we've maybe got, I don't know, 3 or 4 people, perhaps including myself, all working together, still personally knowing every customer, still, getting out and doing the deliveries, not all on my own, but doing plenty of them, getting to meet the people and talk with them and chat with them and have interesting projects. So I think we want to scale it to a point where it's completely safe and secure and viable, but I don't want to take over the world with it.
No. And what about the mushroom growing kits? I saw at Christmas that you're selling growing kits and stuff. I think that's a great idea. People can actually grow these things at home. Yeah,
it's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, we get good feedback on them. People love it. It's good fun. So we produce the mycelium. We're producing the mycelium anyway for ourselves. So we thought, why not package some of it up and sell it for people to fruit at home? So it really, Christmas I had a great response. People really enjoyed it.
And you can get more than one fruit out of it, can't you?
Yeah. Generally speaking, you can get 2. Sometimes people have 3 or 4. But yeah, especially if you look after it. If you look after it well, you can really get your money's worth out of it. And then when you're done with it, you could even use it to inoculate straw in your garden or something and create a mushroom patch in your garden.
Just by crumpling up all the insides?
Yeah, there's a little bit of work to it, but not a lot. Yeah.
And I've seen people who've got log piles in their back garden, drilling holes and putting that sort of stuff. Is that how you would do it?
That's one way you could do it. Logs tend to be quite slow. It takes a long time for the mycelium to get through the log and colonize it and then to produce fruit. Sometimes it can be a year or 2 or never. But straw is another option. Straw can be quite quick.
Really? The mushrooms just grow out the straw?
Yeah, not all of them will, but oysters definitely will.
Really? What about lion's mane?
Lion's mane tends not to like straw as a substrate. It tends to just like sawdust.
Okay.
But that's not to say you couldn't grow it at home.
Could you, so for instance, if I took a load of sawdust home from here and spread it in a pile in my garden and then put the contents of the bag after I've had a fruit in grow, would it potentially grow?
It's not for certain, but it's possible, definitely possible. It's likely that you might get other things growing on the sawdust before the mushrooms do. But if you're careful about it, maybe do it in a container or something and clean it all and have it make sure your sawdust is hydrated properly, and you might stand a chance of doing that.
And what about drying mushrooms? I mean, personally at home, as part of our supplement routine that we have at home, we would have either dried mushroom powder and coffee or little capsules of dried lion's mane and cordyceps and something else. They've got fantastic health benefits, as well as being delicious to eat in a meal. The health benefits of a lot of mushrooms are really starting to come into their own. They're
becoming very popular. Do you find it helps you?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no.
Yeah.
I find that if I have, I used to have like a big spoonful of cordyceps, lion's mane and reishi maybe, or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe shiitake or something like that. It's all in a mixed kind of dried thing, and it would go straight through me.
Yeah.
I had to stop taking it because it wasn't a particularly nice experience. But I did find that maybe it's placebo effect, maybe not. But I found my brain was a little bit clearer.
Sure, I quite enjoy taking cordyceps sometimes. It really makes you feel quite ready and
Yeah?
energized. Yeah,
Oh,
kind
okay. Would you just eat them? You just eat them, surely. Just pick them fresh, or do you take a dried
I've got
powder?
a friend who makes them into truffles.
Oh, really?
So
That's really nice. Is that someone local?
yeah, I think she's starting up. Going to start offering it as a product. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
That's a great little sideline.
yeah, yeah.
And they're using your cordyceps.
Not immediately, but maybe one day.
Are you growing cordyceps?
We're trying. They're tricky. It's very different, but we are trying. I need to put a bit more effort into it and try and learn more about the specifics of how you grow them, because they're very different to what I normally grow.
So do different mushrooms, well, it sounds like different mushrooms have a different kind of way of growing.
Yeah, so lots of them, fortunately, lots of them can be lumped together and grown in the same method, and that's quite convenient for us. But many of them require more specific timing, or some of them require triggers to fruit, like cold shocking them or soaking them in water. Cordyceps is quite picky with lighting, so it has to be colonized, incubated in complete darkness, and then when you're fruiting it, it needs specific lighting, like timing. So I think 16 hours on, 8 hours off, and it's bright, full spectrum LEDs, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
So I might try and experiment with that, and if we get some good results, then maybe I'll make a little cupboard for them somewhere and try and do a few more of them.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And can you eat cordyceps as a meal, delicacy?
Yeah, you can. I've seen people cook with it. People use it as a garnish sometimes.
Really?
It might be a bit over the top, a bit elaborate, but why not? Yeah.
And what about things like sep and things like that? Really, penny buns, those sort of things.
Yeah, so those are mushrooms. There are quite a lot of mushrooms. Chanterelles would be another one, which are they require symbiotic relationships with other organisms to grow, which means we can't grow them in our sterile technique. So I don't know the specific organisms that they require, but some of them require certain trees to be present, or grasses to be present, or bacteria that has to be present in the soil for the mushroom to fruit. So that means we can't grow it through sterile technique.
But you could maybe set up a room with a tree in there and a light, and potentially.
I've seen people culture certain bacterias and use that as a casing layer, they call it, where they'd sprinkle this bacteria on top of their mushroom, mycelium, to trigger the mushrooms to fruit. So, some people are experimenting with it, but I think that's a bit maybe more effort than it's worth at the moment.
It's really interesting though to think about.
Yeah,
each mushroom's got its own way of fruiting, reproducing, of being grown, because you kind of think just almost
mushroom.
let them grow, they'll do their own thing.
Yeah, well, it makes it a lot harder for us, but we're working on it. Yeah, that's one of the goals this year actually, is to try and put more effort into individual varieties and learn how they like to be treated and do a better job at growing them.
So if someone wanted to start growing mushrooms at home, if they had a species that they really liked, and they cooked with quite a lot, oyster mushrooms, let's say, for example, is there a way that they can find information, and is it an easy enough thing to grow at home without loads of specialist equipment?
The grow kits are very easy because they're ready to go. They're colonized mycelium. All you have to do is fruit them. It gets more complicated when you're trying to produce the mycelium at home, because oftentimes you do need sterile technique, and you need Petri dishes, and you need air filtration and all this equipment, which you can do at home, but maybe not on a very small scale. It might not be worthwhile. So typically, if you're growing at home, it's probably best to go with a growing kit. Probably best to go with a growing kit.
And as a chef, what's your favourite mushroom to cook with?
I always go back to blue oysters. They have such a strong flavour and such a fantastic texture, really meaty, and you can sear them up really nicely, like almost like meat. You get that almost crust on them if you cook them over high heat in some oil. They have such a good flavour and texture. But then we've got this new strain of lion's mane that we're growing as well, which is so good. It's better than the one we used to grow. We're switching over to growing it exclusively because it's got this fantastic texture to it compared to the other one.
Really?
Yeah, it's so good.
I've had the lion's mane ones from you before, and I think I put them on a griddle and
Yeah.
squished them right down and cooked them in hot oil and garlic and stuff, and it tasted almost like steak.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and when you give it to a good chef, this is partly why I like working with chefs, because they really make the most out of the product. But give it to a good chef, and they can, make it almost indistinguishable from meat.
Really?
Yeah. Some people get put off by that. Some vegans and vegetarians get put off by that, but other people love it.
That's really interesting. You think that a vegetarian person might be put off eating a mushroom because it tastes too much like
I think one time at a market, I was writing some little cards for mushrooms, like explaining what's what, and I wrote lion's mane, meaty texture. And some woman was like, "Oh God, you must get rid of that."
Really?
Yeah.
And do you sell quite a lot of mushrooms at markets?
We actually don't sell a whole lot at markets. We do markets fairly regularly. We aim to do one every weekend, but this time of year, it's just beginning to ramp up again. So we've not been doing so many for the beginning of this year. But at markets, we tend not to actually sell that much. It's more a thing of meeting people, and we sell enough for it to be worthwhile, but maybe only a few kilos. But it's more a thing of meeting people, showing face, telling people what we do, telling them where we supply, and sometimes selling some of the grow kits. Get some Instagram followers. And
have you ever thought about doing a home delivery service? Like you get the organic vegetable box.
Sure. It's crossed my mind. I think at the moment it would be hard to make that work out, because it would delivering it would be a lot of work. I've found that delivering to individuals' addresses always is more complicated than you'd think it would be. Because end up having to call them, or they give you the wrong postcode. So home delivery, maybe not in the near future, but we are going to have a collection service soon where you can come to the yard and pick up from the farm.
Cool.
I think that's a good happy medium, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And I always ask this question of everyone that comes on the show. You've only been going 2 years, so if you were to go back 2 years and give yourself some advice, what advice would that be?
I'd say it's very good to take risks. It's good to, sometimes it gets very scary, the risks that we have to take, even. I think it's okay to take risks, because even if they do backfire, in a couple of years, none of it will be a big deal. So I think I should remind myself to take risks. And I think the other thing would be find a method that works and stick with it. And that might mean finding a method that someone else uses and sticking with it. It's definitely very beneficial to experiment, but I don't think that should be your first course of action. I think you have to find something that works and then experiment, instead of experimenting to find a way that works.
And is there somewhere where, if someone was interested in growing mushrooms and cultivating mushrooms, is there a wealth of knowledge out there online in books, or is there an online community for
people? Lots of mushroom farmers get very guarded about it, and they don't want to give away their secrets. So it can be, sometimes you do have to dig to find information, but there's some good communities out there. A lot of them you have to pay to join if you're looking for commercial advice. But if you want to learn about mushrooms, go for some Paul Stamets books, and go for the Merlin Sheldrake book, Entangled Life and Mycelium Running.
He's quite an interesting character, Merlin Sheldrake.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
he's I think he is on the Delaware soon.
Yeah. We actually went to go see him in London a couple of weeks ago.
Was he a musician, or his family?
I think his brother's a musician.
That's right. Yeah. Interesting character.
Definitely.
Quite a bohemian life.
Yeah.
He's led.
From a weird family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, pretty cool at the same time.
Yeah.
And are there any risks? Have you found there's been some times where you thought, oh my goodness, what I'm doing now is quite risky? I'm in a bit of danger here.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. So when I've been a bit... I should have been more cautious when I've built my sterilizers in the past, because we're playing with boiling steam and 3-phase power and
a perfect combination.
Yeah, I've decided that anything related to sterilization has to be done by a fabricator and properly welded and pressure rated with safety valves. That's something that I've decided now. I won't say any more.
You've had a bit of an exciting time.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And what about the risks of actually having a humidity controlled grow room? Does that pose much risk?
I always wear a respirator now. I didn't used to, but I've started becoming really sensitive to dust just from the amount of spores that I inhale. The spores are so thick that you can see them floating off the mushrooms. Like it looks like a mist.
Really?
Yeah, and that's all going straight into your throat. So yeah, I wear a respirator in the grow room. And if we have a contaminated batch, that'll sometimes lead to mold, big bags of mold. So I try and avoid inhaling that as well, because spores in general, you don't want to inhale too many of them.
And when you talk about the environment being sterile, are you guys down there in kind of lab suits and gloves and goggles and
We're not that good.
No.
We're not that good.
But that's the next way to go, is it?
Well, we're in the process of building out a culture lab. It's not going to be massively high tech, but it's going to be a room where we're far more strict about what goes in and who goes in and what they're wearing. So we're going to have a space where we do our clean work, and then we're going to have a space where we do our sterile work. So it's going to be just for working with Petri dishes and spawn and liquid cultures. It's going to be far more particular. So
great.
Yeah.
And can you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think I could. I don't know how that'll play out. I don't know what it's going to turn into, but I could see that happening. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Always meeting new people, always going on adventures, always driving around in my van, and it's great. Yeah.
And if people want to come and try your mushrooms, where can they find them?
Well, the best thing is to check our website. We've got a list of stockists on the website, or you can come and find us at our markets, which are also listed on the website. But find us at a market, or go to one of our stockists, or go to most of the restaurants in Hastings.
Most restaurants in Hastings?
I'd like to think so. I think probably most of them. Maybe not. Lots of them.
Enough.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, Robbie, thanks very much. It's been really interesting to find out about mushrooms and the mycelium, and
Sure.
I wish you all the best of luck for the future.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. Yeah.